smarter to be on SportsGrid.
Hour number 3. Welcome to it live right here on this Monday morning on the early line on SportsGrid and all across the SportsGrid network. He is Donnie Rightside. I am Ben Stevens. One final hour for you before we send you into your Monday afternoon and evening. We will talk a lot of basketball later on in this hour. We will look at some college football. The NFL Combine starts today in Indianapolis. All of that and more with some picks and some plays here in this third and final hour.
Yeah, it should be a good time had by all. Interesting topics like we're going to get back into here on court storming here. But you're right, the Combine does this start this week, and many general managers will make that fatal error by saying, I watched a lot of tape on these guys, but boy, oh boy, when I saw them bench pressing and running in shorts and a T-shirt, that really swayed my opinion. Congratulations to those future GMs who will no longer be GMs if they adhere to that type of policy, Ben.
It is the beauty of the NFL draft cycle. When does the tape meet up with the measurables, and how does it all play out for what your favorite NFL organization decides to do in the draft and this offseason? But you're right, Donnie, before we get to any of that in football, we look back on the weekend that was in college basketball. Great results, chaos, madness, the beauty of late February in college hoops. That included a ranked Duke team on the road, albeit booked as an underdog, against Wake Forest in Winston-Salem. The Demon Deacons won the game outright, even covered as a 2.5-point home favorite. The aftermath is the discussion as we welcome in our SportsGrid radio audience here to hour number 3 of the early line on this Monday. He is Donnie. I am Ben. You're listening on Sirius XM channel 159. All of our radio terrestrial affiliates now in the fold as well. Wake Forest won 83-79. Again, the Deacs were booked as a 2.5-point home favorite, and they covered that number despite the fact that Duke was riding a 5-game win streak and ranked 8th in the country. As the game was coming down to its final moments in regulation, Wake Forest fans started to storm the court. It was an avalanche. It led to a collision between a Wake Forest fan and Duke star big man Kyle Filipowski that left him leaving the arena carried off by his teammates with a sprain in his knee. It has led to our conversation for the public. To end out the second hour, we asked, should court storming in college hoops be banned? Most of the public, or at least more of the public now, saying no. Earlier in our poll, that was yes, it should be banned. Now it's no, it shouldn't be. But it's a pretty even split, Donnie. 52% for no, 48% for yes.
Yeah, and you're right. And it should be a close one here because we do love the pageantry. I love a big win where the kids storm the home court. It's exciting. The atmosphere is fun. I understand that. We're at a point in time now where we're seeing way too many incidents. And what's the next incident going to be? Now, we can make it real morbid and say, oh, man, I can't believe that tragedy happened. But you get the point here. When is enough going to be enough where we don't need to have this? And also, there's two choices you can make. It's clear college football and also college athletics in totality, like we're saying with college basketball, they like this because it does add to the pageantry and the atmosphere. And it's fun because, quite frankly, it is a TV show. And when an upset happens and the kids are excited, it's fun to watch them storm the court because it adds to the excitement. We've had some really interesting ones where, they storm the court, they pick up the players, and everybody has their cell phones out. And it's a lot of fun and joy, and the other team gets off the court. We also see instances where superstar players are getting injured, and that can't happen. From a university perspective, it could end very quickly here. Every one of these arenas is played with 4K cameras. You can spot those kids right away, expel them from school, and charge them with terroristic threats just like they do in the professional ranks. Now, they don't want to do that, and rightfully so. So we're looking at ways that we can compromise here, and I think it's pretty easy, Ben. If you put out the flat rules of storming, which means you are not allowed on this court, forget about the time itself. We are going to wait till the other team has left the building here. And if your home team wants to celebrate, then you ring the second horn and the kids run onto the court and it's a lot of fun. Anticlimactic, yes, but there still is a way to add that pageantry without getting anybody injured here, Ben.
I don't think it's all that anticlimactic. I think you allow 30 seconds for the opposing team to exit their bench safely into the tunnel, escorted by security, walled off by security. We have seen that be the case. Now, for this specific instance on Saturday evening in Winston-Salem, Duke's head coach John Shire was, of course, asked about this situation afterwards, saying that Kyle Filipowski had sprained his knee. How significant or serious the injury remains to be seen. But here's what Shire had to say, quote, "When are we going to ban court storming? How many times does a player have to get into something where they get punched or they get pushed or they get taunted, ... It's a dangerous thing," end quote. Now, we saw this earlier, about a month ago, with Caitlin Clark when Ohio State women's basketball knocked off Iowa. Clark was in an altercation, or at least a collision, with an Ohio State fan. She fell to the ground. She left the game. Nothing serious after that. But again, a higher call for security. I think it is rather simple how this is done. Again, you allow the opposing team 30 seconds to exit. It might sound like a swift amount of time. It is really not, once you get a sense of what the court storming is going to be. And it's not just 30 seconds. It is walled off by security. We saw that, for instance, 2 Sundays ago in Lincoln, Nebraska, when the Cornhuskers upset Iowa women's basketball and the security personnel inside Pinnacle Bank Arena walled off the Iowa bench, allowing them to exit and not even interact or come face-to-face with any of the court stormers. Frankly, court storming is a part of the college experience, either a field storm in college football, but that is not met with as much scrutiny because it's a much wider playing surface and a much larger area. Court storming in college basketball is so compact and it can happen so rapidly. That's why we have these incidences. When you have the security personnel trained with accomplishing a certain feat, and they do, keeping fans off of the court until 30 seconds after regulation and safely escorting the opposing team into the tunnel, it can be a ceremonious, celebratory, and fun time done safely, met with 0 injuries. That's my stance on storming the court in college hoops.
Yeah, Nick, and it does make some sense. Again, we still love the climactic point of as soon as that gun hits, everybody's running out there. And we usually don't have any issues, but now we're worried about the 1 or 2 incidents, and rightfully so. And where does that lead forward? Because if somebody does get seriously injured, it's not even so much, Ben, the fact that a player and a fan will collide, bump into each other, bruised ribs. It's the fact that the other team, obviously, that's getting, the fans on the court, it's not their fans. They lost probably in terrible fashion at this point, and they're angry.
Right.
So we're going to then condemn one of the players just to haul, hey, look, I thought the guy was rushing me at one of the fights, so I knocked him out at center court here. We're going to get to that situation, and we don't want to in college basketball. So protocols, as you're right, need to be in place sooner than later.
I will make a point about what Donnie just said because that will be a part of the debate as well before we turn our attention to conference title odds in college football next.
A great big that can block shots, a team that can play defense, and seniors that can put the ball in the hole. That's who you bet on. You don't bet on freshmen. You don't bet on teams that don't play defense. There you go.
I mean, you got to run the guy over to call a foul in a tie game in that kind of a spot. That was a bad job by those refs.
Pharrell Coast to Coast, only on SportsGrid.
If Tibbs can find a way to get the Knicks rolling again as everybody comes back, folks, they are going to shoot up the Eastern Conference standings. They're at 33 wins. I think the Knicks have a chance to maybe, folks, ready? You think I'm crazy? They could get all the way to 2. It is not out of the question.
Betting above the rim, only on SportsGrid.
Like the Minnesota Wild were down by 2 goals today. They were down by 3 goals, actually, today at one point. and they came back and won. Like teams like, the Edmonton Oilers and the Coyote game went back and forth. The NHL really, you could argue, really is the best sport for in-game betting, where you can pull the trigger on both teams.
Sports Rage Late Night, only on SportsGrid.
Your gut says Miami is going to win, and you should take the over. Your gut also said nifty selfies would only go up in value. They didn't. But your head is on SportsGrid and knows the QB is in concussion protocol. The backup has a 45 QBR against the zone coverage. The New York D has the most sacks in the league. So yeah, trust your head. It's smarter to be on SportsGrid.
Anyone that's been to a sporting event, the atmosphere before a game, I think Game Time Decisions has that same exact atmosphere. This is our arena. This is what we do. There is going to be an energy to Game Time Decisions that you will feel night in and night out. The excitement you get when you lock your bets in, when you're figuring out what you want to do, we can zone in on the biggest games each night. I want this to be the place that people come to before the games start so they feel as ready as possible to lock in their cards. We are going to hit every single one of those markets that you need to know about. We're going to go through every single thing, and I've got a great team behind me that's going to help me get the job done. There is not going to be a better place, I promise you, than Game Time Decisions to get that new information, react to it, and be able to then bet accordingly. We will have everything at our disposal, and we will use that to our advantage. I'm Kevin Walsh. Tune into Game Time Decisions from 6 to 8 p.m. Eastern on SportsGrid.
College is our focus. College basketball into college football, live right here on this Monday on the Early Line. To tidy up the point in our conversation about court storming in college hoops following the fiasco on Saturday in Winston-Salem. There was the initial video of Kyle Filipowski colliding with a fan for Wake Forest, having to be helped off the court by his teammates, suffering a sprain to his knee. Again, the question of how significant the injury is, that will be detailed in the coming days before Duke's next game. But there was also an overhead video that looked as though, as a fan rushed past Filipowski, maybe he engaged in the confrontation. It does not matter. It really does not matter. That is not the conversation of storming the court. Neither the fan, the student, nor the player should be put into a situation in which they could be physically harmed. That is the conversation about court storming, not whose fault it was, not where we want to place blame, that neither the fan in a celebratory time or the player in the difficulty of defeat should be put into a situation where there could be a physical confrontation, where there could be a collision that could lead to injury or harm. That is the conversation, and I think that is the number one thing that security arena personnel can do better to mitigate any of that potential harm and to safely have these celebratory environments that we love in college sports, because frankly, we do still love them, which is storming the court, the floor, or a field.
And by the way, we're getting lucky right now that we haven't had an incident, because let's just say things went awry on Saturday. Filipowski's out there and basically didn't get hurt but still gets run into, then decides to pick the same fan out and go after them, which the Duke, which they call the Brotherhood, would be running back on the court to defend their player, and rightfully so. So let's just say we had 15 athletes versus 400 people in the court. That would have been a terrible look, and we wouldn't even be having the discussion today, should court storming be stopped. It would then be a federal offense on a college campus to do that. Expulsion and a lot more fines and prison time at that point here. But we're lucky that it didn't get to that point here. But what Ben's talking about myself is you can still have that fun and pageantry, but do it in a safer way here. No longer just be able to run, just say, hey, they're college kids, they're going to do what they do. Well, if it means taking runs at players and players getting angry, and also, are there people out there actually saying to themselves, man, look, Filipowski actually started that? Are you kidding me? Have you ever been in that environment where the other team's fans are rushing in your direction? And keep in mind, college kids as well who doing drive-bys and letting their voice be known once they get behind a Duke player who is rightfully, hated from the other conferences, and rightfully so, which how much success they have. It's interesting the way it turned out, but NCAA basketball and the NCAA got lucky on Saturday. They need to make those changes because, quite frankly, in football as we transition, maybe we're not running onto the field for the SEC championship game here as the fans and the confetti does come down, and it's time to talk a little college football. So as we segue from the college basketball court over here to college football, we are looking at the SEC, and quite frankly, it's interesting just to say this. Who's the favorite to win the SEC, Ben, next year? It's Georgia, the 2-1 price. Who's coming in close to them? Texas. What? Texas in the SEC? Yeah, welcome to the times are changing here. They're at a 3-1 price here, followed by Ole Miss and Alabama. Saban leaves, and they're a plus 950 price. My goodness, what's that, 4 times what they typically are? Talk to me, Ben, about the SEC college football season next year with Texas as a favorite to win the SEC.
Donnie, this was one of the things that I look forward to the most. In conference realignment, seeing how those conference championship odds would stack up, because for the previous 4 to 5 years, maybe even longer, with the SEC East versus the SEC West, it was Georgia and or Alabama as a short favorite, with the other team in that scenario being just a couple of cents or maybe $1 or so behind. Then we would get a drop-off. Is there value in the SEC West on an LSU, on a Texas A&M? Could a Kentucky or a Tennessee or a Florida unseat Georgia in the SEC East? Those days are done. Divisions are done. And with the addition of Oklahoma and Texas, the SEC looks a lot different. Alabama doesn't even have the second best price. The Crimson Tide don't even have the third best number to win the SEC. And there will be a pathway, not just based on divisional dominance, but just the 2 best winning percentages in conference play to get to that SEC title game in early December in Atlanta. If we were to follow the odds, despite it being the Longhorns' inaugural season in the Southeastern Conference, they would play for a conference championship against Georgia. We factor that in to the college football playoff conversation that we learned last week. 5+7. The winner of the SEC will earn one of those automatic berths to a college football playoff. That is just how the landscape will look in college football. But you do not necessarily have to be unbeaten or have loss, not in the gauntlets that will be the conference slates in both the SEC and the Big Ten, but just to get to the game, to earn that automatic berth. And if you're in the game, you will certainly be at play for an at-large bid. Very different than a season ago, where Georgia lost for the first time in nearly 30 games to Alabama. And because Georgia had one loss in an SEC championship game against a college football playoff team, the Bulldogs did not make the CFP. A very different environment and conversation next year in 2024.
Yeah, my times change here in the SEC. Take a look at it as we talked about Alabama, a plus almost a 10-1 price, not to win the national championship, to win the SEC, and also teams that used to be up on that pantheon here. The Florida Gators, 110-1 to win the SEC championship at FanDuel Sportsbook. Let's take a look at the Big Ten, because once again, times are changing. Yes, we understand Ohio State is retooled and rebuilt for this year, and a favorite now at the FanDuel Sportsbook at a plus 155 number to win the Big Ten. But how about this? Who's in second? Oregon. Yes, those Oregon Ducks from the Pac-12 at a plus 250 price. Michigan, national champions at plus 460. And then Penn State, bless their heart, here at 6-1 with no chance to win the Big Ten next year. Talk to me about the Big Ten here, Ben.
Well, Penn State might actually have a chance to win the Big Ten, because if they were to lose to multiple opponents, as we have seen each past 2 years, the Nittany Lions have only lost to 2 teams in regular season play in the last 2 years, and it's been the same 2 teams, Ohio State and Michigan, each of the past 2 seasons. This year, as you look at Penn State, they will not play Michigan. That is a benefit for the Nittany Lions, as the Big Ten East is no longer a thing, and they will get Ohio State at home, all part of the reorganized Big Ten Conference. To be honest with you, Donnie, from the handicapping perspective, I'm not entirely sure how I am going to approach these markets. It used to be pretty crystal clear through the divisions. Whoever was going to win the Big Ten East was going to win the Big Ten title. Don't believe me? 10 years of the East versus West to decide a Big Ten champion. The East champion won the Big Ten title overall all 10 years. But you could have some value, perhaps, from a cash out or hedge out perspective on the Big Ten West title winner, like an Iowa, like a Wisconsin, like a Minnesota, like a Northwestern, for the most part. That is no longer a thing. Will any of those West teams start to factor in? A Big Ten West team with the shortest price is now Iowa at 35-1. How will Oregon slate into the Big Ten? And what will it take based on win total? Because, again, you can correlate these conference odds to our win totals, Donnie. Only Ohio State and Oregon have a win total north of 10, both at 10.5. If you are a 10-2 team, are you still in the running for a conference championship spot? The odds would say certainly so.
Yeah, and also taking a look at college football, the evolution of the cycle of the season here. Yes, we are outside of the championships and the recruiting ages now and signing to teams, but we're not far away here from spring practice and spring football games that will certainly be appearing on your TV screens over the next couple weeks. So ride this one out because it's going to be fun times in college football with all the changes. Should be a lot of mayhem, which includes an expanded college football playoff, which we love. You know what else we love? Tom Vecchio. Let's talk about it now. Come on back with us right here on the Early Line.
Team that has a great point guard, a great big shot, a team that can play defense, and seniors that can put the ball in the hole. That's who you bet on. You don't bet on freshmen. You don't bet on teams that don't play defense. There you go.
I mean, you got to run the guy over to call a foul in a tie game in that kind of a spot. That was a bad job by those refs.
Pharrell Coast to Coast, only on SportsGrid.
If Tibbs can find a way to get the Knicks rolling again as everybody comes back, folks, they are going to shoot up the Eastern Conference standings. There are 33 wins. I think the Knicks have a chance to maybe, folks, ready? You think I'm crazy? They could get all the way to 2. It's not out of the question.
Betting above the rim, only on SportsGrid.
Like the Minnesota Wild were down by 2 goals today. They were down by 3 goals, actually, today at one point. And they came back and won. Like teams like, the Edmonton Oilers and the Coyote game went back and forth. The NHL really, you could argue, really is the best sport for in-game betting where you can pull the trigger on both teams.
Sports Rage Late Night, only on SportsGrid.
Your gut says Miami is going to win, and you should take the over. Your gut also said your NFT selfies would only go up in value. They didn't. But your head is on SportsGrid and knows the QB is in concussion protocol. The backup has a 45 QBR against the zone coverage. The New York team has the most sacks in the league. So yeah, trust your head. It's smarter to be on SportsGrid.
Anyone that's been to a sporting event, the atmosphere before a game, I think Game Time Decisions has that same exact atmosphere. This is our arena. This is what we do. There is going to be an energy to Game Time Decisions that you will feel night in and night out. The excitement you get when you lock your bets in, when you're figuring out what you want to do, we can zone in on the biggest games each night. I want this to be the place that people come to before the game starts so they feel as ready as possible to lock in their cards. We are going to hit every single one of those markets that you need to know about. We're going to go through every single thing, and I've got a great team behind me that's going to help me get the job done. There is not going to be a better place, I promise you, than Game Time Decisions to get that new information, react to it, and be able to then bet accordingly. We will have everything at our disposal, and we will use that to our advantage. I'm Kevin Walsh. Tune into Game Time Decisions from 6 to 8 p.m. Eastern on SportsGrid.
We're live right here on this Monday on the early line on SportsGrid to give you the proper perspective for every game, or at least a lot of them, on this Monday evening. The jack of all trades steps up and in. It is FanDuel's Tom Vecchio joining us here on this Monday on TEL. A 4-game slate in the association. Some action on the ice in the NHL to look at as well. Vecchio, as always, we appreciate the time on this Monday. A little birdie told me it wasn't your best betting weekend of all time. We stem that momentum and we start a new week. Donnie might say new week, new money. We do that here on this Monday.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Yeah, certainly looking to start off this week on the right foot. We have a pretty straightforward slate when it comes to the NBA tonight. I think we should see a high level of consistency. I'm ready to go.
And we will get into it right here, right now. 4-game slate, quadruple header in the association following the opening weekend after the All-Star break in the NBA. One of the headlines of the weekend was a pretty big scuffle and dust-up between the Heat and the Pelicans over the weekend that led to the suspension of 5 players, including Jimmy Butler, who was suspended for a game by the NBA. So the Heat might be a little short-handed tonight in Sacramento, where the Kings are back at home as a 7.5-point favorite against Miami. Vecchio, what's the first look for this matchup between the Kings and the Heat?
Well, outside of the suspensions, we also have uncertainty if Tyler Hero and Terry Rozier will play. So there aren't many lines posted for some players. I think, Bam Adebayo is an obvious option to go to tonight. But actually, Jaime Jaquez's points prop is the spot that I'm going to be most interested in, depending on when it gets posted. He should absolutely be in the starting lineup. He's in for a big increase just because of the injuries, the suspensions, et cetera, et cetera. I'm expecting it to be in the mid to high teens. And this is a player that we've seen have a good, scoring performances throughout the regular season when players have been in and out of the lineup, trades, Kyle Lowry leaving, Rozier in. So there's a lot going on when it comes to the Heat, but simply based on opportunity, Jaime Jaquez should have a game tonight.
Checking out the Pistons and the Knicks from Madison Square Garden tonight. Tip time 7:30 Eastern. An opening number at the FanDuel Sportsbook here. Tom at 12 is now down to 11, but a total that's listed at 223. Looking at those anticipated starting lineups, still not getting the help back just yet for the Knicks here. Brunson, DiVincenzo, Hart, Achua, and Hartenstein here, but still a double-digit favorite. Are they worthy of being a double-digit favorite tonight against those Pistons?
The Pistons actually been covering some recent games. Like, they're not as bad as maybe they once were earlier in the season. So the Knicks, they're just objectively the better team. Do I think they win this game? Yes. Do I think they cover? Maybe not. I think this just puts in a spot where I'll just look to player props. I think we have a high level of consistency when it comes to someone like Josh Hart. He's playing 38, 39, 40 minutes every single night, because that's just what happens when someone plays for Tom Thibodeau. And he's actually been stepping up a lot when it comes to rebounds, because there's no there's no OG Anunoby. So Hart over 13.5 rebounds and assists is at minus 115. He's routinely putting up 10-plus rebounds. He has 10-plus in 8 of his last 10 games. So he's nearly getting to this mark just on rebounds alone, throwing a few assists here or there, and they take care of business. They win. Maybe they don't cover, but Josh Hart is the guy to go to tonight.
The Pistons have been covering a lot more. Despite losing 5 straight, Detroit has covered in 7 of its last 11 games, 13 of its last 8. New York was maybe the best team in the month of January in the NBA since. The Knickerbockers have been playing some pretty poor ball. They have lost 6 of their last 8 games. They have covered just once in that span. A double-digit favorite at home tonight inside the world's most famous arena in Madison Square Garden. The Pacers ended a 7-game win streak for the Mavs last night at home. Indiana winning outright as a slight home underdog, getting 2 points against Dallas. The Pacers now laying 6 against the Toronto Raptors with the over-under at 244.5. Let's talk about that total, Tom, first and foremost. Every game you see the Pacers line up in, the total is going to be 242 or higher. What is it about the pace and style of play for Indiana that leads to those very lofty pregame numbers?
Well, they like to move the ball in offense. They're obviously, number 2, number 3 in the league when it comes to offensive pace. They're also bad on defense, so they're routinely giving up 115, 118 points. They can outscore anyone. but they just don't have the lockdown defense. So everyone likes to take shots. They like to move the ball quickly. They get out in transition. They also are bad at preventing those things. So, yeah, what was when they started off the season like 13-2 to the over? Of course, that was going to regress at some point, but there's still a high level of consistency. Tonight, Raptors are also a matchup where we should see a ton of points because they were around the league average when it comes to pace, but they've actually been playing faster as of late. They've made some trades. So they're just getting out and running and just showing what some of the young talent that they have. So I'm going to Pascal Siakam over 31.5 points, rebounds, assists. Last night he didn't have, or yesterday I should say, he didn't have a huge game just because he didn't have to. Miles Turner had 33 points, if I remember correctly. But Siakam is a player that's going to routinely put up 10-plus rebounds and assists. He can get to his normal 20 points. And then, he's going up against his former team, which is always good, but that's not really the thing here. It's just a pace spot for both teams where, of course, plenty of scoring is going to be expected.
Nets Grizzlies taking time tonight to tip off 8 p.m. Eastern. Take a look at this. The Brooklyn Nets, losers of 7 of 8 games, but a favorite here on the road, taking on the Grizzlies at -2 currently here at the FanDuel Sportsbook, and a total, how about this, 215.5. Now, the reason we're bringing up the Brooklyn Nets also is they are basically a few games out of trying to get back into the playoff picture with Trae Young now out for several weeks here for the Atlanta Hawks. Can they parlay that into actually getting some wins here tonight? Nets is a short favorite, Tom. What do you think?
Yeah, this is going to be an interesting time. Not just because they've been struggling overall, the coaching change, what are we going to be seeing from Kevin Ollie, taking things over, some slight rotational changes, at least in the first 2 games for the Nets. Like, if you are interested, this is like the time to buy low. And the Hawks theoretically should be struggling, at least moving forward. So when it comes to tonight's game, this is probably the worst game on the slate. I have very little interest here. But Ben Simmons is listed as questionable. Surprise, surprise. He's listed as questionable. Dennis Schroeder, recently acquired by the Nets. He's been playing 20-plus minutes in the first 2 games this side of the break. Assist prop for him, if Ben Simmons is out, is the spot to go. He's actually really good at facilitating the offense. Of course, no Spencer Dinwiddie. Ben Simmons listed as questionable. That would be the spot to go against a bad Grizzlies team.
Listen, it has been a bad year for Memphis. There are no two ways about it. They are 17 games below 500. Obviously, the suspension of John Morant, the season-long injury for John Morant, Desmond Bane, Marcus Smart have been out of the lineup and rotation for a considerable amount of time. But in the 21 games without John Morant, since we learned that his shoulder injury would end his season, Memphis has been a dog 20 times. They have covered in 14 of those 20, including 4 straight. They have also been a very good cover team as of late, like the Detroit Pistons. This, of course, a very short number, only 2 points at home in the grind city. So we're in that playoff push, Vecchio, in the NBA, that home stretch following the All-Star break, well past the midway point. Same point of the conversation in the National Hockey League and on the ice. So as we near the playoffs, the Stanley Cup postseason in the NHL, what do you make of the value and where you think the best value is to win that Stanley Cup?
Well, as you can see with the odds, like we have a very, very tight grouping of teams that are all super close to one another. And I will say, I spoke about this last week on a show with Jim Sonis. We can make a case against basically every team in this top portion. I'm going to stick with the team at the beginning of the season, which is the Dallas Stars. They went through a lot of ups and downs this season where they were injured. Jake Andre, their goalie, was out, and they were still winning games, but it was really sloppy. So they're keeping pace in points, but they don't look good. They finally got healthy. They're finally rounding into form, and they can win that division. They can win the Central. The Avs are starting to slip behind. Yes, the Jets are awesome, and Connor Hellebuyck should be winning the Vezina, which is going to be here, but they have a bad offense, the Jets do. So they're built for the playoffs, but they probably won't have home ice in the second round if they can get past the first. So Dallas is still the team for the Stanley Cup for me.
Making that playoff push here, which means some of these guys will separate themselves, which include the Hart Trophy, which is the MVP of the regular season here in the NHL, a fascinating market. Nathan McKinnon, a plus 210 price. Austin Matthews at a plus 220. Nikita Kucherov at a plus 250 price. And Connor McDavid at a plus 350. 4 guys hunting for that award. If we had to pick right now, Tom, for you, who gets it?
Ultimately, I think Matthews gets it, and it's going to come down to the fact that he's going to have 70-plus goals. I think he's on pace for 74, 75 goals. I don't know if he reaches 75, but he can hit 70. He's never going to have as many points as McDavid, McKinnon, or Kucherov, but doing something that hasn't been done in 30 years since 1991 season is something that is objectively amazing. So, McDavid put up 150 points. Players are putting up 120 points every year. Scoring 70 or 72 goals is not something that happens.
You have not seen a 70-goal scorer in the NHL, like Vecchio just said, since the early 1990s. My money is on Austin Matthews as well at plus 220. What was that, Donnie? Hockey guy?
Was it Alexander Mogilny? I can't remember back in the day. Who was the last 70? Do we know?
Vecchio?
I don't remember who hit 70. No, it was 60. Ovechkin had 65 in 07-08, and it was the last person to hit 65. The last player hit 70 in 91-92. I can't recall.
That was Mogilny
Wayne
in
Gretzky would be my
1993. It says, yeah. Got it. How about that?
I thought it was the great one.
We used to love hockey.
Vecchio. Anyway, he does. That's the thing, Vecchio. DRS, a hockey guy. A Stadium Series clean sweep last weekend. Perfect 2-0 in his best bets. Vecchio, just to flash the board real quick so we can see. You gave us the NBA props, but there is one in the NHL tonight. Where you looking?
That's what Jared McCann had over 2.5 shots. Is that minus 135? The Bruins, they're actually struggling a little bit. That's who the Seattle's going up against. They've led the 4th most shot attempts per 60 minutes since the start of February, which is not the Bruins calling card. They're kind of going through some ups and downs, and Seattle's on the other side. They actually have the 10th most shot attempts since the start of February. So long road trip for the Bruins. Seattle catches them. I don't know who wins this game, but McCann should have his shot attempts.
I like that look. At first, I thought you were saying Jared McCain, as in Duke's fabulous freshman. But then I realized Duke wasn't playing tonight, and Vecchio, a college basketball guy, once we reach the month of March. But the jack of all trades, always getting you set for this Monday with the prop perspective. Vecchio, we appreciate the time, and we're back here on the early line in just a few with more hardwood handicaps.
A great big that can block shots, a team that can play defense, and seniors that can put the ball in the hole. That's who you bet on. You don't bet on freshmen. You don't bet on teams that don't play defense. There you go.
I mean, you got to run the guy over to call a foul in a tie game in that kind of a spot. That was a bad job by those refs.
Pharrell Coast to Coast, only on SportsGrid.
And Tibbs can find a way to get the Knicks rolling again as everybody comes back, folks. They are going to shoot up the Eastern Conference standings. They're at 33 wins. I think the Knicks have a chance to maybe, folks, ready? You think I'm crazy? They could get all the way to 2. It is not out of the question.
Betting above the rim, only on SportsGrid.
Like the Minnesota Wild were down by 2 goals today. They were down by 3 goals, actually, today at one point. And they came back and won. Like teams like, the Edmonton Oilers and the Coyote game went back and forth. The NHL really, you could argue, really is the best sport for in-game betting, where you can pull the trigger on both teams.
Sports Rage Late Night, only on SportsGrid.
Gut says Miami is going to win, and you should take the over. Your gut also said empty selfies would only go up in value. They didn't. But your head is on SportsGrid and knows the QB is in concussion protocol. The backup has a 45 QBR against the zone coverage. The New York D has the most sacks in the league. So yeah, trust your head. It's smarter to be on SportsGrid.
Anyone that's been to a sporting event, the atmosphere before a game, I think Game Time Decisions has that same exact atmosphere. This is our arena. This is what we do. There is going to be an energy to Game Time Decisions that you will feel night in and night out. The excitement you get when you lock your bets in, when you're figuring out what you want to do, we can zone in on the biggest games each night. I want this to be the place that people come to before the games start so they feel as ready as possible to lock in their cards. We are going to hit every single one of those markets that you need to know about. We're going to go through every single thing, and I've got a great team behind me that's going to help me get the job done. There is not going to be a better place, I promise you, than Game Time Decisions to get that new information, react to it, and be able to then bet accordingly. We will have everything at our disposal, and we will use that to our advantage. I'm Kevin Walsh. Tune into Game Time Decisions from 6 to 8 p.m. Eastern on SportsGrid.
Live right here on the early line on this Monday, the hardwood handicaps continue. Only a 4-game slate in the NBA. Not the most illustrious Monday night you will ever see in college hoops with just 4 days left in the month of February, but we will break it down. We'll give you some picks. We'll give you some breakdowns here on this Monday on the early line. He is Donnie. I am Ben. A big victory for North Carolina DRS on Saturday on the road in Charlottesville against Virginia. A win that really puts UNC in that pole position to win the ACC regular season crown and be that top seed in the ACC tournament. North Carolina now 13-3, a full game up on Duke at 12-4 for the Blue Devils. They will face off against one another to end out the regular season. North Carolina went on the road to UVA, won a game that featured less than 100 total points, 54-44. UNC covered as a 2.5-point road favorite, total of 132. Did stay under. Carolina returns to Chapel Hill tonight to host Miami. It's a 15.5-point spread in favor of the Heels. Now 14.5. The over-under, 154 and a hook. What do you expect out of North Carolina? Short turnaround, change of venue, hosting the Canes tonight.
They should hammer Miami. They really should. But when we talk about that, you're used to saying, like, okay, can they cover 6.5 or 7.5 points? Like, we're way over double digits here. 2 touchdowns is what you need to. But quite frankly, what has given you the thought process that Miami can hang with anybody at this point? Still waiting on Nigel Pack to get into that lineup. I believe he's been out for at least 2 weeks now. No sign. He's certainly not coming back tonight. And also, you take a look at a team where you say to yourself, North Carolina is very good on typically we think about North Carolina as just being a dominant offensive team and we'll play some defense to hang in games. Number one overall in efficiency in ACC play this year, it's North Carolina's defense here. And you take a look at a Miami team that can barely score, it feels like at times. Miami doesn't take advantage of the free throw line. So if you're not stealing those extra points, where is it coming? Certainly not from the three-point line or even inside the paint. Because when you take a look at North Carolina being number one overall in efficiency, that also includes number one at defending the three-point shot at only 28%. Number two in conference play inside the paint there, or inside the three-point line, I should say, at around 46%. I don't know where the points are coming from here for Miami. North Carolina probably should walk away with an easy victory tonight in Chapel Hill.
Yep. I completely agree. I would look at this game from 2 angles. Game total under 154.5, not only because North Carolina played against Virginia on Saturday and using that as a recent trend, more so Miami. In their last 8 games as an underdog in ACC play, 7 of the 8 have stayed under. Virtually, when Miami has been a dog, it is for a reason, because they cannot have the amount of points necessary to stay in games, keep it within margin, or maybe pull off the outright upset. This game looks a little bit spooky, though. Short turnaround for UNC, coming back from Charlottesville to Chapel Hill in a 48-hour turnaround on Big Monday. And Miami just got beat at home on Saturday by Georgia Tech. The Canes have lost 6 straight games. They were a 9.5-point favorite against Georgia Tech on Saturday at home. It did not matter. What a disastrous season it had been for the Hurricanes, although there was some optimism following 2 consecutive Elite 8 runs and a Final Four appearance a season ago. I would either look game total under or Miami team total under tonight against UNC. The only other top 25 team that we have in action will be the Baylor Bears. They're not going to be 11th. When this game tips off tonight in Fort Worth against TCU, the Bears lost both of their games last week against top 25 foes on the road in Provo about 6 days ago. And then, of course, on Saturday in overtime at home in Waco against Houston. A 2.5-point spread in favor of TCU. I expect Baylor to be ranked entering this game tonight. The Horned Frogs could be in that spot, though, Donnie, as the unranked home favorite against the road ranked team, where in the month of February, the home favorite is 9-3 straight up and 8-4 against the number.
Yeah, just take a look at the spot, right? We just talked earlier in the show what happened on Saturday, where Baylor had to use a lot of energy to get back in that ball game against Houston, forced overtime, played extra minutes here, and came away with the loss in a game that if they made one free throw with under 5 seconds to go, would have had them with a monster win. Now, there's two ways you could take a look at that. Extra focused here, let's bounce back on a tough loss, but we've seen this time and time again. That tough loss carries over onto the road to take on a TCU team that should be game in this one, and also some of the matchups do make some sense for TCU. TCU number one here, Ben, in conference play at making the three-point shot at close to 38%. You know, his 11th in Big 12 play here at defending the three-point shot. That's the Baylor Bears. This is one of those emotional games that TCU should have enough in the gas tank. Why? Because Baylor basically got drained on Saturday here. Give me TCU in this game.
Yeah. TCU is the best cover team in the Big 12. They are 10-4 against the number. They are the only team now surpassing Iowa State, who has covered in more than 70% of their conference games. TCU has won 3 of its last 4 games. They have covered in 4 straight. The only defeat was to Texas Tech as a 5.5-point underdog. The Horned Frogs lost that game by 1. This number is the number for a reason. I think there is an idea that Baylor might bounce back after dropping 2 straight, despite the short turnaround and now being on the road. I would trust the number and lay 2.5 with TCU. We'll see, though. Baylor losing 3 straight games. That would be an interesting feat. Now we go to the NBA. We mentioned how Miami is going to be shorthanded based on the suspensions from the fight against the New Orleans Pelicans over the weekend. It's a 7.5-point spread for the Heat tonight against Sacramento. The Kings victorious in Southern California last night. Second leg of a back-to-back. A change of venue, moving back home to Sacktown in Northern California. The Kings won outright as a 5-point dog against the Clippers in Los Angeles, winning by 16, now a 7.5-point home favorite.
Again, we're usually behind the 8 ball here, handicapping these games early in the day. Some guys' question was we brought in Tom Vecchio to talk about this game as well. But the anticipated starting lineup tonight for those Miami Heat, Terry Rozier, Tyler Hero, Caleb Martin, Jaime Jaquez, and Bam Adebayo. It's also one of those games you just said we had a back-to-back situation for the Sacramento Kings, and it wasn't a back-to-back on their home court. Back-to-back now, which means some travel from Southern California to Northern California. Most people would be looking to take the Sacramento Kings because the Heat should be shorthanded tonight. But if I get that starting lineup here, I'll take the 6.5 to 7.5 points here with the Miami Heat and trust that culture can bounce back here, maybe galvanizing from those suspensions here, which they will not have Jimmy Butler on the court tonight. I'll take the team that's going to be rested tonight in the Miami Heat against a team like the Kings that probably should, yes, and might win this game, but they don't have to cover. I'll take the Heat with the points.
12-13 against the spread for Miami as a dog this year. Sacramento 17-18-1 against the number as the favored side. I don't love the line in this game. I don't love the total. You know where I might look. It would be at the player combos for Domantas Sabonis. I think you said it earlier in the show, Donnie. He's Nikola Jokic light. He is going to go out and flirt with a triple-double each and every night. 43.5 is the PRA. Points plus rebounds, plus assists for Sabonis tonight. Tough matchup, though, against Bam Adebayo on the other side. Next up in this 4-game slate around the NBA in Indianapolis, the Pacers also on the second leg of a back-to-back, but remaining at home against the Toronto Raptors. Not only the return of Pascal Siakam, or I guess Pascal Siakam against his former team in Toronto, but the Pacers are playing good ball. 4th best covered team in the NBA, 31-25-3 against the spread this year. Indiana has won both and covered in both of its games following the All-Star break. 6-point number in favor of the Pacers tonight, over under 244.5.
Yeah, we'll see if we get that pace. And again, talking about the Indiana Pacers, a little bit different scenario that we talked about the Kings, because you are on a back-to-back, but also winning by 20-plus points on their home court yesterday. And also keep in mind, you take a look at Tyrese Halliburton yesterday, Ben, 31 minutes played. You take a look at Pascal Siakam, 29 minutes played. This wasn't both of those guys playing 38 and 39 minutes and should be extremely tired for this game tonight. I look for a nice performance out of the Indiana Pacers, taking that momentum after knocking off a team that had 7 straight wins. The Raptors aren't nearly as good as certainly the Dallas Mavericks are. I'll take the Pacers tonight in this game, even though it is on a back-to-back.
Yeah, I know it's the second leg of a back-to-back, as Donnie mentioned, but I would agree. I don't know if I love laying 6 with Indiana. What I'm focused on, though, is that over-under. I would lean with the Pacers winning outright, probably flirting with that cover as well. Toronto 17-18-1 as well against the spread as an underdog. The totals are so interesting to me when it comes to the Pacers, who went over in 14 of the first 15 games this year and then pretty much set the market that any game Indiana was going to play, the total was going to be 245 at least, something in the mid 240s. It was 246.5 earlier this morning, now down to 244.5 as the Pacers have gone under in 5 of their last 6 games. And they don't go under by a drastic amount with less than 220 scored or something of the sort. Yesterday they went under despite scoring 133 points and allowing 111. It's just the total was at 251. The Pacers under in 5 of 6, under in each of their 2 games since returning from the All-Star break. I might lean an under tonight of 244.5. I'm certainly leaning to the under for the Pistons and the Knicks tonight in Madison Square Garden. 11-point spread in favor of New York. The total at 223. This should be a gift for the Knicks, who have not been playing good basketball. They've dropped 6 of their last 8. I don't know if they'll cover as a double-digit home favorite inside MSG against Detroit, but they should win this game outright.
No, they should win this game outright. And you're right about looking at that under also. You take a look at the Pistons, who had a close ball game on Saturday, I believe it was, against the Orlando Magic. Do you think that the Pistons are going to win this game? Probably not. But how many times do we use that type of scenario and say, well, all right, it's a 4.5 or 5.5 point game. If you don't think they can win it, there's no way you could bet them as the dog. Well, the Pistons can lose this game and lose it by double digits and still get the cover. That's the angle I'm looking at here. And until I see a full gas effort here out of the Knicks, now, I don't just mean Jalen Brunson playing well and Josh Hart. When they get their superstars back in the lineup, sure, they'll be able to run some of these bad teams like the Pistons up a flagpole. But the Knicks right now in a position where they're saying, like, look, it ain't about style points and winning by 20 to 25 points on our home court. Let's just get a victory and move on here with the Pistons. So I'll take the points tonight with the Detroit Pistons. I'll take the double digits.
They have played, has New York, 25 games in the calendar year 2024. They have been under in 21 of 25. The Pistons have been better at covering numbers, as Donnie just alluded to. Now as an underdog this year, Detroit is profitable, which we never thought we would say amidst the historic losing skid where they hardly covered. Detroit now 26-24-1 against the number as an underdog. They have covered in 7 of its last 11 games. The Pistons have covered in 13 of their last 18, despite a 5-game losing skid. A 5-game losing skid in which Detroit has gone under in all 5 games. Now we go to our final game of the 4 in the NBA tonight. The Grizzlies, a 2-point home underdog, total 215.5 against Brooklyn. Neither team all that great this year, Donnie. Who covers a number?
Yeah, if you're looking at 2 teams battling for basically nothing, even though the Brooklyn Nets trying to get themselves into the playoffs, you look at those numbers and it's a losing streak and fired head coach and a lot of turmoil here for the Nets, which if you're just reading lines, this is great for the Nets. Wait a second, a team that's lost 7 of 8 games on the road and are favored tonight. If you're just looking at that angle, it's probably for the Brooklyn Nets. But for me, I just can't trust that basketball team at this point right now. And laying points on the road, I can't do it. Only look for me in this game, Ben, would be the Memphis Grizzlies for me.
Yeah, listen, if the spread was like 4.5, 5, I'd be like, this is a Grizzlies game. They are going to cover this number. The odds makers have it wrong. But with where Brooklyn has regressed to and Memphis covering numbers at the clip they are, I think the line is about right. I have no play in this game between the Nets and the Grizzlies. We will have one final play for you that is known as a best bet on this Monday. Come back and join us after the break here on the early line for the best bet before we say goodbye.
And seniors that can put the ball in the hole, that's who you bet on. You don't bet on freshmen. You don't bet on teams that don't play defense. There you go.
I mean, you got to run the guy over to call a foul in a tie game in that kind of a spot. That was a bad job by those refs.
Pharrell Coast to Coast, only on SportsGrid.
If Tibbs can find a way to get the Knicks rolling again as everybody comes back, folks. They are going to shoot up the Eastern Conference standings. There are 33 wins. I think the Knicks have a chance to maybe, folks, ready? You think I'm crazy? They could get all the way to 2. It is not out of the question.
Betting above the rim, only on SportsGrid.
Like the Minnesota Wild were down by 2 goals today. They were down by 3 goals, actually, today at one point. And they came back and won. Like teams like, the Edmonton Oilers and the Coyote game went back and forth. The NHL really, you could argue, really is the best sport for in-game betting, where you can pull the trigger on both teams.
Sports Rage Late Night, only on SportsGrid.
Your gut says Miami is going to win, and you should take the over. Your gut also said your NFT selfies would only go up in value. They didn't. But your head is on SportsGrid and knows the QB is in concussion protocol. The backup has a 45 QBR against the zone coverage. The New York D has the most sacks in the league. So yeah, trust your head. It's smarter to be on SportsGrid.
Anyone that's been to a sporting event, the atmosphere before a game, I think Game Time Decisions has that same exact atmosphere. This is our arena. This is what we do. There is going to be an energy to Game Time Decisions that you will feel night in and night out. The excitement you get when you lock your bets in, when you're figuring out what you want to do, we can zone in on the biggest games each night. I want this to be the place that people come to before the game starts so they feel as ready as possible to lock in their cards. We are going to hit every single one of those markets that you need to know about. We're going to go through every single thing, and I've got a great team behind me that's going to help me get the job done. There is not going to be a better place, I promise you, than Game Time Decisions to get that new information, react to it, and be able to then bet accordingly. We will have everything at our disposal, and we will use that to our advantage. I'm Kevin Walsh. Tune into Game Time Decisions from 6 to 8 p.m. Eastern on SportsGrid.
Closing out our 3 hours together, live right here on a Monday on the early line on SportsGrid. I am Ben, he is Donnie, and this is the SportsGrid app, the ultimate sports betting companion app available for download at both the Apple and the Play Store. Scan that QR code on your screen. Included in the SportsGrid app, 5-star plays. Those are known as best bets. So are these. Before we say farewell, before we say goodbye, it is time for a best bet on this Monday. It is time for bye, bye, bye. What is Donnie Rightside getting into on this Monday night?
Pretty simple for me. We talked about some college basketball action. If I think the Baylor Bears are a little bit hungover from a loss on Saturday, I'm going to take those TCU Horned Frogs under Jamie Dixon. They picked up a nice victory this weekend at home against Cincinnati, 75-57. I look forward to extending that graceful hand and shaking it in that line, being victors tonight here against those Baylor Bears. Why? Baylor's going to rely on that three-point shot, and it was pretty good at defending it. TCU tonight, they're on their home court. I'll lay the 2.5 points tonight. Give me TCU to knock off Baylor.
Baylor's not going to be 11th in the country when the AP poll comes out later this afternoon. TCU could get back into the top 25, but let's assume things are where they stand right now. An unranked home favorite against a ranked road team in the month of February. That home favorite, 9-3 straight up, 8-4 against the spread. Donnie's going to be keeping the horns up, that horned frog, tomorrow as he hopes for a of 2.5 points. I look at the other top 25 team in action tonight. North Carolina back in Chapel Hill at home against Miami. The Canes stink. They've dropped 6 straight games as an underdog in their most recent 8 ACC games. They have gone under in 7 of 8. 154.5 is that number. I don't think Miami adds up enough into the offensive output. Give me the under tonight between North Carolina and Miami of 154 and a hook. 2 college basketball best bets for you on this Monday. We'll look back on how they went on a Tuesday. He is Donnie. I am Ben. We'll talk to you at 8 a.m. Eastern time tomorrow here on the Grid.